Welcome to the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Every week, you'll hear strategies for building your online service-based business your way. And now, here's your host, veteran freelancer, author, and TEDx speaker, Laura Briggs.
Did you know that if you add up all the time I've spent side hustling while I also had a day job, you'd be looking at over 2.5 years of experience balancing a full-time position with my freelance business. In this episode of the podcast, I'm going to walk you through some of the issues to consider when you are side hustling and how to keep a good line of division between your day job and your side hustle. When I first started my freelance business, I was working in an in-office job where I stayed for 13 months after starting my side hustle. So like most freelancers, I had very slow month one and month two, maybe a couple of $100s. I didn't really imagine that this was going to scale. And it wasn't until I had my first $3,000 month that I saw that this could really have a lot of potential. And I was working in an insurance brokerage during the day from 8:30 to 5, where I had some decent opportunities and I was learning some new things, but I got my work done really quickly. So I was also bored and needed to have other things to occupy my mind as well. And yes, I did pitch my boss on working part-time instead, and they said, "Oh no, we need you here," and then promptly didn't give me any more work. So freelancing really helped me just even thinking about it or like taking notes on my legal pad and doing things like that really kept me motivated of how I was going to organize my lunch time, how I was going to handle my at-home time, right? How I used nights and weekends to get ahead with my freelance business. And then most recently from 2020, the start of that till almost the middle of 2021, I was also in a full-time remote marketing position where I worked, I would say pretty consistently from 8 to 4 almost every day in Central Time. So it was pretty much your typical 9 to 5, except I was doing that job remotely. So in that sense, I dialed my freelance business back down to a side hustle. And I think this is so relevant for new and experienced freelancers because for the new freelancers, you probably need to side hustle for a while to give yourself that confidence to quit your day job. You probably don't have enough consistent clients yet. You're not ready to make that leap. And doing this as a side hustle can really improve your confidence there and give you some experience for when you make the jump. You'll also feel a little bit better financially because you'll at least have an established marketing plan and hopefully a pitch and some samples that work as well. For experienced freelancers, however, you may get the opportunity to step into a more traditional role at some point in the future. And if that's the case, you want to know how can you take your business back down either to very minimal amounts of work or to something that's going to be as manageable as possible. So you'll find people freelancing as a side hustle anywhere from, they work on one project per month to people who do it 10 to 20 hours per week who really treat it much like any other part-time job. Because you can do this with freelancing, this is one of the biggest benefits to having a creative or a technical side hustle working in the freelance world. There are very few other jobs or positions where you can say, you know what, I want to take on more work. It's going to be the hours I want to work at the rates I want to charge. If you go and get a traditional part-time job, you don't have the say in that. You're working someone else's schedule. You're working at the rate that they are willing to pay. So freelancing is so malleable, right? Like it can change shapes based on what you need it to look like. And it definitely takes a lot of work and what I would call like advanced scheduling ability to manage your freelance business if you are also doing something else during the day. So let's get into my first suggestion here, which is about staying disconnected from the thing you are not working on while you are working on the other project. So it's really important to have a really good line between your work and your business. And you need to think about this not just from your perspective about how you'll draw that line, but from your employer's view too. Most clients, they're not as concerned about it. Like some of them might want someone who's more available. But most of the time it's going to be your employer that you're kind of trying to build your business around. So for example, when I was working in my most recent position, my business manager, Melissa, handled all my social media. She posted for me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, etc. I was very conscious of the fact that I did not want my employer to think that I was the one posting that, even though Melissa was logging in and doing it for me. So I told Melissa not to post during central business time hours. I just didn't want there to be that perception that like, oh, Laura's on the clock or whatever for us. And she's posting, things about her business or personal stuff on social media. So that was one way that we drew a really good line. Another way to do it is to have a separate computer. Do not use the same computer that your employer gives you. This also creates a really good physical boundary between your work projects and the business that you are running. So you have to stay disconnected from the other thing, the one that you're not doing. So when you're at work, you need to train your clients. You're not available to answer emails. Maybe you check it over lunch, but you're generally not available. You're not available for calls, right? And I'll talk about how to handle calls in a little bit. Rigorous schedule blocking is essential. And so I sometimes let people book coaching calls with me, or clients could do intake calls, but we proactively blocked every day of my personal calendar with my work hours, just so that there was never someone who could like book in during the work hour time, just as a precaution, right? So there's all kinds of ways that you can just say, during these hours, I am focused on these projects. So I really tried to, between 8 and 4, that was when I was doing my job. I wasn't thinking about other things. If I had a note or needed to make a mental reminder or something like that to do something in my business, I would jot it down and come back to it when the workday was over. I worked before work. I worked after work. I mostly worked on the weekends, especially during this most recent time. I did a lot of work on the weekends, and yes, it's exhausting, right? But I took my freelance business down to about $7,000 to $8,000 a month in revenue instead of where it was. And that was, cut it in half, more than in half, right? And so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to keep all of my clients. So I only kept my favorite clients. And I think that's really important as you think about dialing up or dialing down. What will your job allow you to do, right? It's not just about the physical time, but how much mental energy is your day job pulling from you that you may need to have adjustments on the freelance side. So stay disconnected and use rigorous schedule blocking. You need to know when something gets to be too much, right? You need to know what your personal boundaries are. For newbies, this will start to be a problem for them when they're waking up earlier or when weekends and nights are not enough. They're turning down projects. They're no longer able to work on what they wanted to because they're just too busy, right? So you have to know your own personal limits to be successful in balancing both a day job and a freelance side hustle. You have to be willing to say where you're going to make the cuts, right? So I have examples on both sides. When I was working in that day job way back in the day, I went to my boss and said, hey, I don't think you need me full time. I don't really want to be here, full time. There's not enough work for me. I'll go part time. I'll work only in the mornings, right? So that was me saying I'm scaling back on the job, right? And then in the reverse, when I made this transition into this role in 2020, I handed over everything in my business to Melissa. I said, you have got to make sure that all the emails go out on time, all of the events are happening, the podcast is produced, basically everything, my book launch, it all has to be handled. I'll do the strategic pieces of it on the nights and weekends and get it to you, but you have to handle all of it. And I had to go to some of my clients and say, I'm not available. I also had an amazing opportunity for a great freelance client who I'm working with now that came to me in the middle of that position. And I said, I can't take this on right now. It's too much in scope. It's too much of a conflict of interest. I'm not available because of my full-time job. So you will have to make difficult decisions, embrace that and expect that, and know where you can pull things back or not. If you want or need to stay in the day job, you're going to have to be the most flexible around your freelance work, but you have to know how much is too much. How do you handle calls? Okay, this is what I used to do when I was working East Coast hours, 8:30 to 5. I worked only with West Coast clients. I would pitch people only on the West Coast who were 3 hours behind me so that when I had my lunch break, they were just coming into the office, or when I finished for the day, they were still in their office for the afternoons. And so work on pitching clients in different places, pitching clients during the evenings, telling clients, hey, I have a day job. I can only talk in the evenings, or I can only talk during my lunch hour. I balanced that for well over a year, and it did start to get crazy because there's only so many lunch hours you can give up for prospective clients, and you're like running down to your car to do the phone call if you work in a traditional office. But that's how I chose to handle them, right? So if you work West Coast hours, perhaps that you pitch clients who are on the East Coast, so you can do those calls before you go into work or something like that. Now, another question that often comes up is, do you tell your boss? Do you tell your clients? I was very candid the second time around that I was going to keep some of my freelance clients. It was asked of me in a final interview question, hey, are you going to, cancel your freelance business? Are you going to fire all of your clients? And I answered honestly. I said, I don't know. I'm not going to be able to work with them in the scope that I am right now, but I'm not firing them ever because, and frankly, this is a personal belief that I have that I recently shared in a LinkedIn poll. I heard from a CEO that they were not a fan of anyone in the company having side hustles and that the employee's sole focus professionally should be on the job. I disagree with this at a fundamental level because you are handing over all of your power to that employer. Now, I get you should not be distracted from your day job working on freelance projects, side hustles. However, there's so many things in people's lives that they have to do after work that is their business. It's not your business if I have kids and I spend all my time with my kids. It's not your business if I'm training for a marathon and I run 4 hours a day when I am not on the clock for this job. So frankly, if there's not a conflict of interest, right? If you're not poaching clients, if you're not stealing things from your employer, using proprietary information, crossing any of those ethical lines, I frankly feel it is your business what you do. Now, if you have a good relationship with your employer, I don't think it hurts for them to know that you're doing a side hustle. There's really not a reason to tell them, right? I really don't think it's their business. The same way you probably wouldn't go and tell them like, yeah, by the way, between the hours of 6 and 10 at night, I drive for Uber. That's your business, right? It does get a little trickier if you're doing freelance services that are similar to what you're doing in your job. But again, I still believe that it is your right. And I asked this poll on LinkedIn recently, and over 1,300 people answered, with 97% of them saying that it is not an employer's business and they should not be dictating what employees do or don't do. We all realize in light of the pandemic how quickly things can change. And so putting all of your eggs in one basket with employment is really dangerous. That might be why you're seeking a side hustle to begin with. So I'm a big proponent of making sure that you protect yourself and draw a nice clean line, right? Use your own computer. Don't work with people that you meet through the job unless your employer is okay with that. Have really good boundaries, but I don't believe in telling your boss unless you're telling them because you're going to quit, right? So do you tell your clients? That's the other question. Most clients don't really care. It can be helpful to tell them if you are still working full-time. I've found that this used to be a much bigger issue and has gotten easier over time. So clients used to really care, but most of them understand that lots of people are side hustling. So unless they're asking for daily calls or 9 to 5 availability, this shouldn't be an issue. And if that's a concern for you, look for services where you can provide deliverable-based work only that is based on a deadline, right? So you're not going to be able to apply for the problem, like the jobs where they need you to be on call, they need you to be on Slack, those sorts of things. So there are some of those ethical issues to consider that I brought up. Some of them being, should you tell your employer when someone that you meet through your employer wants to hire you for freelance work? I think base that on a case-by-case situation. Is it, you don't want your employer to think that you're crossing the line. And so it is better to overshare maybe a little bit if you can trust them. If you're in a toxic work environment, make the best call for you. I always believe in don't screw over your employer, but don't give them everything either. That is a huge lesson I learned the second time around being an employee. Stop giving them everything because they are not giving you everything and they do not care about you as much as you think. And so it was really, really powerful to learn that boundary again. Be professional, have a good boundary line there. Bring up an ethical issue to them and say, hey, I'm turning this down because so-and-so came to me and I'm not comfortable with it. But do that on a case-by-case situation. So how do you know when it's time to leave? A lot of the time, a goal for a freelancer is to get to the point where they can quit their day job. That's very, very common. How do I quit? How do I get out? If you're overbooked, if you're barely making your deadlines, if you're seeing increased demand for your services and you're decreasing your ability to keep up with it, these are all signs that you could leave. Also, if you start dreading your day job, if you hate it, if things at your day job start annoying you at a very deep level where they were like irritating before, mildly irritating, but now they are full-blown obnoxious and you cannot stand it, right? So those are some signs that it's time to leave. Be honest with your employer. When I quit the second time, I just said, yeah, I want to focus on my freelance projects. Like there were other issues at play, right? But there's no need to go into those details at that point in time. Just step back and say, you know what? I'm going all in on my business, and don't expect them to support you either. Some may support you. I was just on the call with one of my clients who has a lot of remote employees too. And I'm a freelancer for them, but they have a lot of remote employees. And he said, man, we just lost so-and-so. She just left us full time because she wants to go work on a variety of freelance projects. So we're not going to be able to replace her for a while. This is going to be a challenge, but he understood, right? He got it, that was her right, and was overall pretty happy for her. Not every client is going, or not every employer is going to feel that way. Some will be angry with you. Some will be surprised that you chose to quit. So be prepared for some of those reactions because they can be hard to hear. You're so excited. You're ready to make the jump. You are ready to have less of the chaos, right? But your employer may just be reeling from the fact that you're truly leaving, and that's going to set them back in more than one way, right? So some important lessons I learned in this process is not everyone will get it. Not everyone in your life is going to understand what you're doing. Also, you don't have to go full time with your freelancing. You can decide that you love your day job, or that you're using your day job as a means to an end, like saving and paying down debt, building up a down payment for a house, getting some financial stability, the health benefits, right? Like there's so many things that you can get out of a job aside from personal fulfillment, and you may decide to stay there for that. Another common misconception is that having a side hustle is only about making more money. So this is one of the tricky aspects of, should you tell your employer or not that you're freelancing? Because they may think, oh, you're not happy here. Oh, we're not paying you enough. Oh, you don't have enough fulfillment and variety in the work you do for us. And that is not necessarily true. It really is about building a safety net, okay? Because so many people learn when they were laid off that there is no safety net for employees. Your employer, especially if you're in an at-will employment situation, can decide not to work with you at any point in time. And that's not illegal for them to let you go. They can have a cash flow shortage and fire you. You could have a supervisor who hates you, who just fights to get you out from day one. There's so many things that can happen. My main goal, and I tell this to every freelancer, is don't let anyone ever take you to zero. You should never have just one anchor freelance client. You should never just have your employer, because you need to be able to pivot and adapt. And the most powerful thing you can have are choices. So when you have both a side hustle and an employer, you get to choose. How long do I stay at this employer? Do I stay at this employer at all? How many hours a week do I work in my freelance business? Those are the choices you get to make. And that is really where that safety net comes into it. Now, don't get me wrong, earning the extra money is awesome too, especially if your employer is not paying you what you deserve, but it's definitely not the only benefit. And then finally, it will be tiring. I cannot stress this enough. I think looking back in hindsight, it's very easy to be like, well, yeah, sure. My husband was in his internship in his fourth year of medical school. And afterwards, he was busy. I had the nights and weekends to be able to do the work, but that was really hard. It was exhausting, okay? I was so motivated to get out of this job that I worked really, really hard on those nights and weekends. I lost some clients because I couldn't do calls during the day. I was tired some days going into work. I really struggled to balance it and figure out that rhythm. The second time around, it was a lot easier because I'd done it before and I knew going into it what I was capable of and what I thought my part-time freelance business was going to look like. And being proactive and making those plans of delegating so much to my business manager and only keeping a handful of freelance clients was powerful. And that's what gave me the choice to leave too, right? I was able to walk away from that position in April of this year, along with millions of other people who also started the Great Resignation during that month of leaving their day jobs. I was able to leave because I knew I could dial my business back up. I was passing on opportunities. I had freelance clients falling out of the woodwork wanting to work with me, and I was having to tell them no. I was increasingly less happy with my day job situation and just felt like more and more was being piled on me without maybe the appreciation or acknowledgement of the level of those things. And so the times lined up perfectly for me to say, you know what, I'm really ready to make this leap back into full-time freelancing. And I'm going to feel excited about it. And it's going to open a lot of doors. And it has. My business has. I am on track to have my biggest ever month as a freelancer since quitting and walking away for the second time, walking away from a day job. So I won't lie to you. It's definitely difficult to balance both of those things, but it can be really rewarding when you ultimately decide that you are ready to make that jump. And you may never be ready to make that jump, but you know that you have the buffer if your employer makes the jump on you, or if something happens where your income takes a hit or you need more. So use your side hustle freelancing to give you the options to make the decisions that are best for you. All right, I wish you luck.